It's been, I think, probably about a week since I've actually been in my own garden, and it's time. There's stuff I gotta get done, so we're gonna go ahead and take care of it. Actually, the last time I was in the garden was the last time I was with you guys, so you know everything that it looks like, with the exception of the growth that has happened since then. So we're gonna come out here, check it out. I've been kind of looking at it as I'm going in and out of my driveway, and I knew there was a pretty great need for even more than it looks like from afar. There is a great need for some trimming up. Almost everything out here is going absolutely bonkers, and it's time to string some stuff up, trim some stuff back, get these things tethered. Whew, this is overgrown. My husband has told me approximately 57 times that all I have to do is clean up the little bit of stuff that is here, and he will trim everything back. Looks like we have reached the stage. Oh my earring. We have definitely reached the stage where everything in the greenhouse is dead, and my yarn is somewhere in here. I don't really want to go in there. I should have thought this through, but I need my yarn. Oh, that's my only way to really string this tomatoes up. Let's see what we can find, shall we? So hot in here. I wonder if it's froze. I can't find it. So, when you can't find it, find a different one. One of the keys, if you are planning to use just simple, cheap yarn to string up your tomatoes, I advise you to find one that doesn't glow under a black light. Reason being, black light flashlight hunting is tremendously effective for tomato hornworms, and it's very difficult to hunt hornworms when your yarn glows. Ask me how I know that one. I did that last year with some yellow yarn, but I can't find my flashlight, so here's to hoping. Well, it might be better than nothing. I got two options here. I guess I need to get a new pair of garden shears, huh? So, we're gonna string these guys up. We're gonna single stem them. You might be wondering, why take all the time to do all that? My reason for doing this is that we can plant them much closer together, and in the long run, when each plant only has a single stem to focus on, it tends to put out larger fruits. I don't know if there's more fruit, but the fruit that it does have is larger. And then I also like to take this opportunity to trim up the base so there's no leaves touching the ground. So that's what we're doing here today. And you just take your yarn, and this is each one. I mapped all these tomato plants out, and they're planted every third rung. So we're just going to tie each tomato plant very loosely so we can train them up this one pole. And then as it grows, about every rung or two, or we're tying it up the vertical rung, so about for one or two rungs going horizontally, we'll tie it up, and that'll kind of help train it up the rung, whatever, I don't know what you call it. And you probably want to do it sooner than what I'm doing. But you know what? Now is better than never. And it's definitely later on some of these. Like some of these have already fallen stretching out shoots to the sky. These ones on this row are cherry tomatoes. I know a lot of people don't really string up cherry tomatoes because they tend to be more determinate, meaning a determinate plant has a determined amount of output that they have, and trimming it back doesn't help with that. So you're kind of limiting its potential. But in all the time that I have been growing tomatoes, I've never been left wanting for a cherry tomato, so I'm not too worried about that. Cherry tomatoes and paste tomatoes tend to be determinate, but it'll say on your seed packet. And then if they're determinate, that means that the main stem, like the leader, this will continue to grow until the plant is killed, whether that's through the frost or through disease. So, and I just like to leave everything in place so I don't take anything out unless it's diseased, but thankfully these have not succumbed to disease yet. They look actually really healthy. We have our first fruit. Hooray. For anybody newer to kind of this single stemming, or filming it for that matter, for anybody new to this sort of trimming method, you can tell which ones that you want to trim because they're in the armpits. You can see that this is the main stem. You can see there's a leaf growing out right here. Here's an armpit. That is what is called a sucker. It sucks the energy, and it does produce. So if you want to leave it on there, there's no harm in it. Sometimes we get to the end of the season and we're kind of kaput and we don't really want to. Sometimes even we'll get to the end of the season or even the middle of the season and we're just kind of kaput and we just don't feel like coming out here to deal with it, and we just let them go wild. And while that may not be necessarily the most ideal thing, it still produces, it's still fine. It will, however, succumb to disease at some point. And the reason for this is that it gets overcrowded. I mean, it's pretty simple. There's so much growth that there's not enough airflow to be able to properly remedy airflow. I don't know if that's the right word, but 3, 2, 3. The mosquitoes have decided that they would like a snack. And I'm apparently that snack. When you're stringing these up, you really want to make sure, if you have one of these trellises like I have with the cattle panels, they are galvanized, so they have a little bit of a rough texture to them. It may not be obvious, but it is. And you really don't want to force the tomato to go anywhere that would cause it to rub up against it. I have caused disease doing that. It's very obvious that was the cause of it, because you'll rub off some of the protective coating on the skin. I don't know what it is. It just seems to be there. And if it doesn't have that protective coating, it's open to disease, and it will get it through that spot. I can tell. I might have to get some pants on. It is, the mosquitoes are out in force. Oh, maybe I should just go put some calendula oil on. Maybe I'll just do that. But anyways, just, let it go where it naturally wants to go. If you have let it go a little bit too long, like some of these ones, I'm going to let it go where it needs to go. I'm going to try and guide it in the right direction, but the next time I string it up, it'll probably be right back on point where I want it to be. But the main reason that I do this, simple, for airflow. We have very, very humid weather here in Missouri. We had tremendous amounts of rain when I lived in Washington during the summer. This summer we might actually get a good amount of rain, if the spring has anything to say about it. But generally it's incredibly humid here, and it's not what I'm used to back in Washington. And we didn't get a whole lot of blight the last 2 years that we were living here, but we've also had some. So who knows what this year is going to bring. Blight is a fungal disease, and it comes from the soil, and it can be all different types of fungal diseases can be exacerbated through a lack of airflow. So if you have one of these, which I do highly recommend if your soil allows for them, it's just 3 T-posts and a 16-foot cattle panel, and I string them up in a row and I plant along that, and it's phenomenal. It has a tremendous amount of strength. It offers a lot of support that those traditional, tomato cages, I mean, really, they don't work. I mean, flat out. They'll work for peppers, but that's about it. So if you want to have good, robust plants with no fears, with no concerns about breaking the trellis or them outgrowing the trellis, I can't recommend these highly enough. We were planning to do some experimenting with different trellises this year, but we both just ran out of time. We're just not going to do it. So maybe we'll have time next year and we'll do a little bit more experimenting next year. But for this year, we already got these trellises in place. We don't got the time to build new ones, so we're going to make the most of the ones we got. So I did come across one that is a difficult one that you might not be able to tell which part of the plant to trim. Let's see if I can get you an actual shot. I might have to take you off the tripod. This one here, right? It just shot up into 2 different directions. And this one almost looks a little bit weaker. This one almost looks a little bit stronger. But this one is actually offshoot, because if you turn it a little bit, you can see armpit. Can you see? Yes. So this one here is actually the main shoot. This one is an offshoot. You can keep them both if you want to, but we're going to trim this guy here. That's a weird angle, I know. And you don't have to use yarn for this. You can use kitchen string, cotton string. You can use tomato tape, that sticky green stuff. But yarn is just what I happen to have. And mosquitoes. I happen to have mosquitoes in a lot, so. And just make sure if you're going through all the trouble of trimming, trim up enough to where it's not going to touch the ground. Because remember, that's where the blight comes from. It's a soil-borne fungus. So if you trim the tomatoes up enough to where, you don't want it to be just off the ground. You want it to have a good amount of clearance so that when you get a rain, or when you water them, the backsplash is not going to splash up onto your leaves. If you don't tend to have blight in your soil, where we lived in Washington, it was a guaranteed death by blight, absolutely 100%. It was just very common in the area. It was everywhere. Around here it doesn't seem to be as much, so it's not as much of a worry here, but it's still good to make sure, because tomatoes, they just don't like being wet. They like to be watered very deeply, like once a week, but yeah, they don't like to be wet and soggy. Another thing that a lot of people, when they're first beginning, myself included, might be concerned about is when I'm trimming off all of these branches, how am I going to know that I'm not cutting off the fruit? Very easy. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I'm sure I can actually show you what I'm trying to show you here. All right, so you can tell this one is, you can see it has, this one here has like a center to it. You can tell this one here growing out of the armpit. This one is a sucker. This one here, this is just a leaf. You can tell it just looks like a leaf that's been cut off by something. But these ones here, they're very obviously leaves. They're just growing off the center. Almost every single one has a sucker growing out the armpit. These are flowers. There's no leaves on them. It's just flowers. So if you look at it really carefully and just kind of make peace with it, you will absolutely be able to tell which ones are suckers, which ones are leaves, and which ones are going to produce fruit. Remember, no leaves are on this flower. No leaves are on the flower. It's just going to produce fruit. That is its sole purpose. Don't fear. You'll be able to tell the difference. be cautious in the beginning to make sure that you're very secure with what you're doing. You don't want to trim off anything excess, but you can see with what I just showed you, it's hard to make a mistake. It's more in your head. So I was able to get 4 trellises strung up and got all the suckers removed. And while I was doing that, I found something really cool that I'm very excited about. I gotta make sure that I remember to actually tell my husband that these exist so he doesn't accidentally weed whack them down. But I'm pretty sure that he would have looked at them and seen what they are and left them. We have a lot of volunteer all over here. Most likely tomatillos, but they could theoretically also be ground cherries. But I think based on the height that they have, I'm gonna say that they're tomatillos. And I'm very excited about that because, okay, here's the thing. I started a lot of tomatillos. Not a single one was able to survive my abuse or neglect. What is on the screen? Oh no, did I scratch my lens? I don't know what's there. So at any rate, I am super excited to see that. Not so excited to see these. We got some Johnson grass, some purslane, all kinds of stuff. But I am not even slightly surprised that we have so many volunteer tomatillos. Even have a little bitty fruit coming. Because the tomatillos they went wild last year. I would have been surprised if we didn't get any tomatillos. So we still have 3 beds left to do tomorrow. The bugs are out in force, so I don't want to be out here anymore. It's really that simple. Don't overthink it like I did when I was first getting started. Well, honestly, for the first while that I was doing it, it's so easy. Tomato plants are one of the most resilient plants out there. As long as you keep them away from blight, they will withstand almost anything but a frost, really. Blight and frost. Those are game enders. But don't overthink it. If you accidentally over trim it, you trim the wrong spot, even if you accidentally trim off the top, it will recover, I promise you. Don't worry about it. Just let one of the side shoots grow as the main top and it'll keep on going. Don't even worry about it. So hopefully you were able to learn something from my very simple, very basic, very brief tomato trellising tutorial. And I hope you guys have an amazing week. Peace out, sauerkraut.